Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us live for today's webinar. My name is Mathilde. I am the Manager of Marketing here at Amity, where we provide customer success managers with the platform they need to retain and grow their customers at scale. I am thrilled to be hosting today's webinar with our very good friends over at Userlane, and I really can't wait for everyone to hear what we've got prepared on the topic of how to measure and influence adoption for customer success. Our presenter today is Andy Mura. He is the head of marketing at Userlane, and he's worked at as a CMO and a CEO for technology companies before joining Userlane, where he's learned everything there is to know about customer adoption in order to help the company grow. So Userlane is a really awesome tool in short, and I'm sure that Andy can tell you more about it. But Userlane is an interactive navigation system for softwares, and it personalizes the user onboarding process to facilitate customer success. So they are experts on the topic of customer adoption. So really pumped to hear what they've got prepared. No, I just want to share a few housekeeping notes before we get started. Join us on Twitter. We'll be using the hashtag CSWebinar. You can tag us at GetAmity at UserlaneHQ. We'd love to engage with you and retweet your screenshots and your comments as well. So don't hesitate to take screenshots of the slides and share with your network. We will be sending the recording and the slides from the webinar as usual. So check your inbox, and before the weekend, you will get a note from me with the recording as well as the slides, which you can rewatch and share with your network as well. And we do have a Q&A planned at the end of the webinar. So at any point, open your Q&A panel in Zoom and send us your questions. We also have a chat panel on the side, which we encourage you to use to exchange with other attendees. But we do encourage everyone to use the Q&A panel to send us questions at any point, and we have some time set aside at the end to answer them. But just send them our way whenever they pop into your mind. And for anyone who is joining us for the very first time this week, I just want to give a little bit of background about Amity. Amity provides a customer success management software that allows health scoring, tracking engagements, automating emails, and analytics, and much more. And if you want to learn more, I do encourage you to request a demo online, and you should be able to find the link as well, the direct link in the chat from Azra if you want to click on it, save it for later, or just let me know and I'll arrange that for you. But that, even though I hope that gives you a little bit of context around why we are here today and why Amity is hosting all those webinars about customer success, that's all you're going to hear about us today, because I'm super excited to be introducing our awesome presenter, Andy, and it's time to get started with the topic. So Andy, thanks so much for being with us. We're super excited.
Thank you so much for the nice introduction. I hope you can all hear me well. If you can't hear me properly, just complain in the chat and Matilda will let me know.
Exactly.
If you improve on that. But thanks a lot for the awesome introduction and for having me here today.
Of course. Thanks for being with us.
So what we're going to do today, so what I would like to discuss with you. So we're going to talk about customer adoption, and specifically we're going to introduce objectives and definitions, so to make sure we're all on the same page when it comes to understanding what customer adoption is and why customer adoption is so important for customer success. Then I'm going to go quickly through different stages along the customer journey to introduce different processes that can lead to customer success. I'm going to show you what measuring adoption means, although I'm not going to go too much into detail regarding metrics and so on. As Mathilde pointed out, you'll all have access to the slides. So if you need to go more into detail, you're free to check everything that I included in the slides. And finally, obviously, the most interesting part, I suppose, is defining ways we can actually influence adoption to drive customer success. So let me quickly jump in and let me present you some of the objectives. So when we talk about customer adoption, what we want to achieve is, first of all, we want to link our solution to a specific need. So imagine if I think of, like, for example, emailing somebody, I immediately think of Gmail. If I think about, for example, automation, I think of Pardot and so on. So, but that's me, right? So I have like specific needs daily, on a daily basis at work, and I connect that specific result I want to achieve with a specific solution. And that's exactly what we want to achieve when we talk about customer adoption. We want to become that go-to application that perfectly addresses that specific need. So every time the customer wants to achieve that result, they have to think of our solution. And that's why we have to create, we have to change the behavior of the customer in order to create this sort of routine. So we have to activate that customer to go back to our product every time they want to achieve that particular result. And we obviously want to show and prove that we constantly add value to our customers. That's obviously part of the overall customer adoption. So when we talk about adoption, we talk about different levels of adoption, right? If you look at a customer level, so if we go very granular in detail, the single person, the single user, we have user adoption, which is how engaged, how active, and how often that specific user goes back to our solution. And feature adoption is just a subset of the entire user adoption. But if we step up a little bit and we look at the account level, so we look at the entire organization, we talk about company adoption when our software solution, obviously if we work in B2B, is adopted at a much higher level, so throughout the entire company. So it becomes kind of like a specific asset that the company is part of the company policy and routine, so to say. And one step higher, we go to a level of the entire market. In that case, we talk more about product adoption. And in that case, well, product adoption follows the same, steps. We all know, you have innovators and laggards, early adopters and stuff like that, but that's a whole different story. For customer success, it's specifically for customer success, feature adoption, user adoption, and company adoption are the most important topics. Customer adoption occurs at different stages of the customer journey, right? Not only when the people actually use our software solution, it can even begin before users actually interact with our software. So adoption can be triggered even before people are in a trial and even before onboarding them. I'm going to show you what I mean by that in a minute, because we're going to talk about these different stages of the customer journey. And different things happen at different stages of the customer journey. And it's important to underline the fact that for pushing adoption, we have to make sure that our company cycle from pre-trial to renewal, that this cycle also matches the cycle of our customers, which is not always possible. It's not, but I'm going to show you how activation and engagement can lead to faster cycles, hence to syncing your company cycle with the user's cycle. So let's start from the first stage, which is pre-trial. So even before the users interact with our solution, that's already a good point in time to connect a specific need with our product. With educational content, you can create awareness and say, we are the specialists. So let me give you an example. For example, of course, I'm a marketer. Sometimes when I think of, I got a problem with Twitter marketing, where do I go? The first thing I do is I check Social Quant. That's a company, they have a marketing tool for Twitter. Not so important, right? But for me it is because I'm a marketer. So I know every time I have a problem with Twitter, I can use their solution. I can check their blog. I can read their ebooks and so on and so on. And that's why with educational content, promotional messages, we can already achieve the first stage of adoption, which is connecting a problem to a solution, specifically a customer need to our problem. To our software, sorry. The next stage, obviously, is onboarding. When we onboard users, we want to achieve engagement. What I mean by that, we want users to explore our software and try out different features, especially perform key actions, which are like interacting with key features of our solution. If your solution is a, for example, project management solution, would be like creating a first, project and so on. So we, during onboarding is a mission critical phase in which we can actually show what we can do. That's why we need to provide a proper, we should provide users with a proper checklist they need to follow to reduce time to value, so that they reach that famous aha moment in which they say, okay, I see what your solution does and I totally love it and I want to work with it and I want to know more. Because if you offer clear objectives and processes and a smooth UX, obviously maybe with guidance, of course, well, at that point, people are more active, are more engaged. They want to know more. They are motivated to look more into your solution. And that brings me to the next phase. If they are highly engaged during the onboarding phase, it's easier to activate such users, which means to have them come back more and more over time. And in that case, that's the actual implementation phase, in which customers will invite more team members, for example, to join, and will create integrations. That's extremely important, right? Your software is not the only software application customers will use. Your software will be integrated in an entire ecosystem. So the more the more integrations you can provide, the better, the more deeply the solution will be implemented, obviously. And that's an important step in habit formation and activation, because then it becomes kind of like part of the overall ecosystem. And again, email communication, feature announcements, creating reports to show what you're actually doing for the customer, sending notifications, and so on and so on. This phase is extremely important to create activation habit formation. So knowing that the customers will always go back to our service every time they need to accomplish a specific result or reach a specific, accomplish a specific task. So why is it so important? So we got to the point of activation. Activation was the previous slide. And so, but how is activation connected to customer success, right? Well, in here, I try to show you how active users go directly to advocacy, actually, because if you have a high level of activation and great experience in your product and continuous adoption, plus if during your interviews you also set the right tone and expectations and set the right metrics to verify what kind of return on investment your customers can expect from your product, and you generate proper reports and reminders of all the value you're adding and an overall great customer experience, that automatically leads to customer success and renewal, expansion, and possibly advocacy, obviously. So as mentioned, now I want to introduce a couple of metrics, but as mentioned before, I'm not going to go too much in detail. So don't worry, it's not going to be that long. And I'm going to quickly move to the next phase, which is actually ideas on how you can increase adoption. So when we talk about metrics, there are tons and tons and tons of metrics. On this slide, you can see, for example, some of the onboarding metrics, which measure how quickly customers go through specific actions during the onboarding phase, and how many of of all the signups we have go through the entire process. Not going too much into detail, but there's something I want to highlight. If users, or let me say that users who don't perform some key actions in the first 24 hours after sign up, they are really likely to churn. And users who don't go through the entire onboarding checklist in the first 3 days, they're extremely likely to churn. That's why onboarding metrics are engagement metrics which need to be monitored over time. And also time to value, of course, to make sure users go, reach that aha moment as fast as possible. When we talk about activation metrics, so how often users go back to our products, there are different metrics we can use, and it really depends on your period of observation, of course. Sometimes you can observe daily active users or weekly active users or monthly active users. And so two things I want to highlight here is, first of all, always try to differentiate between users and accounts. It's really important to know also how many users are active in a specific account so that you have a, more or less you can verify health and for single users and for entire accounts, of course. So these kind of usage metrics provide a very good insight into customer health, and that's why we monitor them very closely. These aren't the only activation metrics, of course. You can also check how much time people spend in your product and how many sessions per day. One thing I want to highlight here is this word cohort. So all the metrics you collect shouldn't be referred to single customers or accounts, but also to customer segments. Let's say, for example, you segment users based on company size. I don't know. So you know that, okay, enterprise customers tend to spend a lot of time in the product, and mid-sized companies, not so much. Well, in that case, when you measure your metrics against segments, you don't need to worry too much if you see some kind of variance. You just, measure it against a segment, and then okay, no worries. This account is healthy. No need to worry. The important thing is, first of all, that you segment users and you can, measure different metrics against different segments, but that you also monitor these metrics on a daily basis. Why? Because, inactive users are really prone to churn. So as soon as you see users are not really engaged during the onboarding phase, or okay, onboarding went okay, but right after signing up, well, they're not doing that much. They are going back to your product once a week. For these people, it's really hard to justify why they're using that software, right? So imagine in my team, if somebody in my team, a marketing manager, comes to me and say, I have this new piece of software, great. And then we use it like once every 3 months, but it's still in my budget. So how can you justify that, right? So there's no way. So I don't see any return on investment. So I'll force my manager, for example, to obviously cancel the contract. And the same occurs in every situation. Other metrics that you might want to look at is obviously we always refer to these kind of key actions. You want to make sure your customers interact with the most important portion of your software, because it might happen that sometimes you have a customer as a customer success agent, you have a customer on the phone and they say, well, you know what, I didn't achieve any results with your software, so we are very frustrated. And then you dig a little deeper, and you find out that they only used a couple of features in your software, and they didn't scratch the surface of what your software solution can actually do. So in that case, it's not that there's a mismatch between your customer and your product. It's just that they weren't activated properly, and there was no feature adoption and no customer adoption in general. That's another example of metrics. In this case, retention metrics. We all know there's a normal curve, and in this chart you can see like a very optimistic curve with a 50% retention over time. And here a very bad curve, that's the worst case scenario actually, where you have absolutely no product market fit. So we want to be somewhere in the middle, and obviously this curve, if you generate this curve for your users, is not going to be just one single curve, but you will have different similar curves overlapping for different customer segments. That's how you define retention over day one, first week, which is essential, first 30 days, and so on and so on. So you want to make sure you retain your users and they're actually active in their accounts. And again, for feature, you can also check, for example, how efficient your feature announcement solution is. You can test different solutions, right? You can have pop-ups, webinars, you can have emails, you can have tooltips, whatever you want to use for feature announcement. You can verify if each single feature is well received, adopted, and this kind of adoption, again, measured against different customer segments. So what user segments seem, for example, to be indifferent to a specific feature, or what segments are particularly interested in using another feature, and so on. All these feature metrics are very useful because you, as or customer success agents, are the people who are in direct contact with the clients and who can then actually plan a proper roadmap together with the product people based on what the customers really need. So it's essential to monitor their product usage to also influence the product roadmap. So why? Because different products fall into different categories according to how engaging your product is and how active. So how often you use a product, your product can fall into different quadrants. We have 4 quadrants. In here, as an example, well, I used general applications. For each quadrant, I would have an example in the SaaS world, for example. But since I don't want to have any enemies, I'm not going to call any company disposable. So as a, for this specific slide, I'm going to use generic examples. So this quadrant is where you want to go. That's what we want to achieve. It's to generate this kind of addiction, which means a highly engaging software that also has a high value, and I want to go back to it as much as possible. So as an example, I have Instagram here, highly engaging, and it's a habit because you go back to it multiple times a day because you always expect a reward when you go back to it, something exciting. The opposite would be a disposable piece of software which is not engaging and not useful. In this case, I have a photo filter, something like, okay, you test it once, your friends laugh, everybody's happy, you're never gonna go back to it anymore. In this quadrant, you have a very useful product you go back to very often because you have some value, of course, you see some value in it, but not highly engaging. So if, for this example, I use Google Maps, right? You want to check where your favorite Japanese restaurant is, great, but you're not going to go there multiple times a day because it's fun, but because it's just useful. And the opposite is not useful and not engaging. Or it is engaging, but for a while, so it's just a fad, right? In this example, I used Pokemon Go, super exciting, fun, and then the enthusiasm go down. You don't want to be here, you don't want to be here, you don't want to be here. You want to achieve this status. You want to have a highly engaging product that also is addicting. So we talked about the metrics that you can implement to measure adoption. Now the question is, yeah, but how do I collect these metrics, right? So, well, there are 2 different ways. You have lagging indicators, which are provided by historic data. And then you have leading indicators that you collect directly by interacting with the customer and creating the whole customer journey. So when we talk about, for example, lagging indicators, we talk about your CRM solution. You have no idea how many product data you can also immediately see in your CRM from, if your data is up to date, obviously. Another solution is, well, your engineers have access to your database. They know everything that happens in their software. So why not create a product dashboard? You can use something as simple as a Google spreadsheet, just pulling data from the dashboard and visualizing it with normal charts. You have no idea how much information you can already pull from that thing. Okay, wait for it, shameless plug. Of course, Userlane being a user onboarding automation solution, we also collect onboarding data. We can see how engaged people are in your onboarding process, and we can also warn you, hey, watch out, this person is not very active, maybe you should intervene, and so on. But from this point on, right, once you hand over customers, from onboarding to the next phase, which is more like checking the day-to-day implementation, Amity, well, there. They offer a great solution. I'm not just saying that because they are the hosts, but because we love Amity and we worked with it for a while. It's awesome. And in this case, you can collect lots of product related data, specifically about usage and so on. And this data can also be sent through integration also to other customer success solutions, and can send emails and stuff. So really good. And on top of that, of course, there are other solutions you might have heard of, usual suspects like Mixpanel, segments for integrating different products into one single data, to centralize data, Kissmetrics, Whoopra, Amplitude, and so on. But the most important part, obviously, is you. By having access to the customers directly, and through interviews and surveys, you have a direct and immediate feedback on product usage. So that's why you have to integrate both historic data, what you can collect, and interview data. So last part of the webinar, and then we can move on to the Q&A. How to increase adoption. We talked a lot about adoption, how to measure it, blah, blah, blah. But now the question is, yeah, Andy, that's all good. I love it, but what am I going to do tomorrow, right? Or actually in 1 hour after, after this webinar is over, what can I do? How is my life going to change? Well, there are different things you can do. There are proactive and reactive measures. Obviously, proactive measures are very effective because sometimes reactive measures, well, it's kind of too late, but it's important to have a plan B. And so you have to make sure you can also intervene if you see something goes wrong. I'm going to talk a little bit about reactive measures now because in terms of proactive measures, I have some slides that actually define habit formation, feedback loops, and reminding customers of the value, and so on. The only thing is, that I should mention, because I guess I don't talk about it later on, it's what do I mean by product roadmap transparency is, customers love to be part of your product roadmap. So be as transparent as you can with where your product is going, what you have in mind for them, what you have in store for them, because that's something they can expect. And it's like this kind of anticipation, this kind of foresight they have. It's like, oh yeah, that's gonna come, right? You are gonna introduce this feature. I totally need that. And it also generates more, interest in your product. Plus, if they have any suggestions, you want to make sure their voices are heard, and so that their feature suggestions are actually implemented over time. But as mentioned, let's quickly move to reactive measures, and then we go back to proactive measures. Reactive measures, I'm sure communication is king in this case, either by phone or by email, depends how your customers love to communicate. But I give you an example of both proactive and reactive usage of email with a product called Autopilot. Autopilot is a marketing automation software. When you use it, what happens is every time you try a new feature and you test something new, or you interact with a key feature, they actually send you an email and say, hey, congratulations, we saw you tested it, you tried it, awesome, you did a good job. So that's, kind of like proactive. I feel rewarded. I feel like I want to explore more. And reactive, they sometimes write you emails and say, okay, you've been using our product for a month, but we noticed you never used this feature. So why is that? And they write, is it because it's confusing? Then please, let's arrange a phone call. Or because you don't need it. In that case, well, there's nothing we can do. But that's a very good example of personalized outreach, which is triggered by behavior. And obviously, during your interviews and with educational content, you can always make sure your customers are up to date with, they're active in your software, and you ask questions, specific questions on what they expect, and if the expectations were met, why not, and so on. So, but when we talk about habit formation and feedback loops, we talk about changing the behavior. We want to have, a habit. And for that to happen, our customers must understand everything there is to understand about our product. So they need to know what they're expected to do and how they can do that, at what point and why. So they have to see some utility value. So they have to see, okay, so if I do this, I achieve this. How can I do that? I know how to do it, and I know exactly when. If the what, how, when, and why of your product aren't clear, well, you can't even start triggering activation. Once you are sure that your users and your customers are fully aware of the functionality of your product and what they can expect from it, then it's time to implement some feedback loops in which you reward them for positive actions, and you make sure that for like every action is followed by a result. That's what we call a feedback loop. So the first phase is during the onboarding phase, you have to bring users step by step, like, a scaffolding process, step by step, always with increasing complexity. You have to bring them to mastery. When we feel we master a solution, when we are comfortable with a piece of software, we are also more likely to engage with it because we don't feel, the pain of using it. It's not bad. And then for every so the idea is every action should be followed by immediate feedback. You know that from user experience design. You know that when customers do something that works, that should be a signal that says, oh yeah, that's perfect, or hey, you achieved that. And then every action should be followed by a specific reward so that you can spawn motivation. Rewards can be anything, right? We love things like status, access, power. Think of, like, for example, being able to access a VIP lounge when you fly or something like that. That gives you, it's really rewarding. But the same can happen in your software if you unlock specific features. Once you achieve a particular level, you can, invite more people. You have access because you master that particular piece of software, so how you are motivated to do more. But when we talk about UX, we're talking about people, right? So software is not about the software solution. We're talking to people. We are solving problems, like everyday problems. So when we talk about people, motivation can come from different areas. I wrote here some examples of emotions that are linked to rewards. So all these components from, for example, recognition or sense of achievement, novelty, these are emotions which are always rewarding. If you can put a little bit of these in your software at different stages, if you can show your customers, hey, if you do this, you can achieve that. It's up to you. No, you have them on the phone. You can send them an email and say, hey, do this, and you will achieve that. That always pushes people, to being a bit more active. It's what we basically call also gamification and stuff like that, because that's what gamers implement in their solutions to push people to take action. So just simple rewards. Rewards are very useful to generate motivation, and that's our topic, obviously, is generating. You have to be motivated, you have to feel competent, and you have to feel confident, and then you're motivated to be more creative. But motivation alone, look at this chart. So when or how can we change behavior in general? So I'm highly motivated, for example, I want to lose weight, right? That's my goal. I really want to, because that's my goal for this year. But I'm at work and I have no trigger. Nobody tells me to do anything, and I don't see anything. I don't know. So without a trigger, even if I'm highly motivated, I'm not going to do anything. Say that I'm highly motivated, there's a trigger, but whatever I want to achieve is too hard to do. Then we are in this part of the chart, which is the action line. We are below the action line. Well, action is not going to happen. So behavior is not going to change, even if I'm highly motivated, because it's too hard to do. So when do we activate people to do something, to perform an action? Well, when we provide motivation, because we connect action to rewards, when we provide the right trigger at the right time, but also when we remove all obstacles so that whatever they have to do is easy to do. In that case, we are in this area of the chart, and then people actually perform actions. So the questions you have to ask, and we're almost at the end, the important questions you have to ask yourself are your users motivated to interact with your product because they know that every action is connected to immediate results and rewards, or are just actions connected to, like, pedantic stuff they have to go through? It's not gonna work, right? And do you have aptly timed triggers? An email sent at the right time, a phone call, a message, an on-screen message, or an intercom message, I don't know, different things that you can put in place to trigger action. But once you have the triggers, once you motivate users, ask yourself, are there any obstacles that might hinder action? If you tell me, hey, it's time to invite more members to join your team in the product, but then I can't find the button that allows me to invite people, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to be frustrated, and frustration is the opposite of what we want to achieve, right? If you want to create an addiction, we want to make sure we have positive feelings. And obviously, do you offer proper guidance and know-how? This point is connected to removing obstacles. Once you do that, and that's my last slide, you can map your customer journey, and at each step you can check, do I have motivation at each step? So really map every phase of your customer journey and think, how would my customer feel at this stage? Why would they go on to the next stage? Why would they invite people? Why would they do that? So see how you can add motivation at each step, and a bit of curiosity. Curiosity is a very powerful trigger for action, of course, and engagement. Segment users and make sure you customize the journey according to their specific needs. So I can't map one single journey and that's one size fits all. Unfortunately, I have to create the proper triggers and motivation for different customer segments. Once I have the triggers, and once I have motivation, I have to make sure that the whole user experience is smooth. I have no obstacles, and make sure people invite other people to join their team, because as the more champions you have in a company, the easier it is to go from customer adoption to company adoption, because in that case the whole company becomes a champion. They support you, they all endorse your solution. And last but not least, obviously, everything everything we've said makes sense if you monitor adoption, because you can't change what you don't measure, right? So if you don't monitor, and if you don't set the proper alerts or something like that to make sure you follow your users, or the customers you're responsible for very closely, then there's no way you can intervene or you can modify something. You personally as a customer success agent, but also suggest, for example, modifications in the software to your product team and similar things. So only if you monitor adoption, then you can actually trigger adoption personally or with cross-functional units in your company. And remember, always show outcomes and proof of ROI. One last example, when you use Zapier, for example, they send you, I guess, a weekly email, something like that. And they write, hey, this week we triggered 1,200 zaps for you. Great. I have, for me, it's great because I know that that's automation, right? So these are actions I would have had to perform myself. I didn't have to. I'm super happy. So they immediately show me, okay, they remind me of the value they're adding. And with this, I would say, that's the end of my mini presentation, and I would quickly call back Mathilde, and I would like to hear if there are any questions, something that was completely confusing, or if everything was okay.
Everything was awesome. Thank you so much, Andy. That was an awesome presentation. We do have a lot of questions already lined up. I encourage everyone to send us more. We'll try to get through as many as possible.
Yes.
So let's just get started right now.
Yes.
From Robert, going back to one of the slides you had about onboarding, can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by time to value?
Sure, that is an essential metric. So imagine you try a new solution, right? So you are trying or testing a new piece of software, and then it takes 20 minutes to set up your account, 40 minutes to enter your data, a lot of time to invite people and whatever, and set up your account. Finally, the account is ready, and then they tell you, okay, now it's time to read 25 PDFs on how my system works, watch 20 tutorial videos, come back in 20 hours. You know, the user will be really, really, really frustrated. So in the perfect world, users should be able to sign up for a trial, click and immediately be active. And the sooner they achieve results, and that's what we call value, these results, the more likely they are to become actual users. So a very short time to value, which is the time between sign up and first results, the shorter this period is, the more likely trial users are to convert into paying customers. And obviously, that's what Userland does, right? So Userland is a solution that actually reduces time to value dramatically by guiding users in real time through all the processes they have to go through. But so this time to, you can influence time to value with overall design, of course, UX design, with limiting the amount of data you require from your customers from the very beginning. There's always time to fill out profile data and so on and so on. Just make sure that in no time, literally no time, I try your solution, 10 minutes later, I can already see results in form of, I don't know, a chart or immediate results, depends on what your solution does, obviously. And that's what we call time to value. I hope it's clear, but if it isn't, I'll be happy to add some more stuff.
Awesome. That was great. Thank you. Another question we have here that's great from Anna is, do you have any tips for products that are pre-product market fit and looking for that product market fit? She's saying that they just did a beta launch yesterday,
Yes.
and she's starting to see that they should start visualizing some data now, but it's a little bit overwhelming.
It is overwhelming. It is overwhelming. So being like in that stage is extremely exciting because you can change basically everything, right? Once your software is in a very late stage, due to legacy problems, you're not going to be able to change anything. So all the mistakes you included from the very beginning up there, and they're going to stay there. That's good to be in a beta because you can already design the overall experience from the very beginning to push activation. So what you have to do is check all the metrics which are available and check what metrics you can actually collect. Focus on 3 or 4 metrics which are significant for the very beginning, right? So at the very beginning, you're not going to look into product adoption so much. You're going to check how how engaged are users from the very beginning, right? You want to know how quickly users understand your solution, how quickly they interact with all the key features, and you want to see how often they go back to it and how much time they spend in your solution. These are already very good indicators of what kind of product you are designing and who you are designing your product for. And because at the beginning you don't have that many resources, obviously check those 2 or 3 metrics which actually make sense and which are actually very easy for you to collect, because it's true, it's totally overwhelming otherwise. Focus on those 2 or 3, optimize for those metrics, and move on to the next set of 2 or 3 metrics which make sense for your solution. Obviously, knowing the specific case, it's easier because there are, for example, products you go back to on a daily basis. Let's say, for example, a project management software. Obviously, you want to use it every day, right? A communication software, again, product like Slack, use it on a daily basis. But say you offer a solution, for example, to compare or to, I don't know, sign important contracts. I don't know. You're not going to go back to it every day, and it's okay because you're not supposed to. So in that case, for you, daily metrics are not as important as, for example, for a project management solution. So it really depends from each different case. But the good idea is pick those 2 or 3 metrics that perfectly make sense for use case, focus on those, optimize, move on, and cycle until then, obviously, you're at a you reach maturity, you have more people, more resources, you have a much deeper insight into what's going on, and then you can do much more, of course.
Mm-hmm. Awesome advice. Great. We have another question here that's from an anonymous attendee.
Yes.
How and where do
Probably
you
my
share
sister.
your...
Sorry.
That's it. Hiding. How and where do you share your product roadmap? And what is your take on how much to actually show?
Oh, awesome question. That is brilliant. And I tell you why, because I don't know if you know, there's a software solution called Hotjar.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and with this software solution, you can collect metrics on, visitors' behavior, like people visiting your website. You can see what they do, right? And I was talking to the product manager. What they do, they actually publish their product roadmap from now for the next 3 years. Basically, everything they already have in mind is already public. So they
Wow.
show everything. And my first question was, dude, I love it. Excellent. So I'm sure you want your users to be part of your journey, but aren't you afraid that competitors can simply copy all your ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying, yes, there's a risk that something like that might occur, but the relationship we create with our customer is so strong because we're that transparent, and it's totally worth the risk, right? Because we embarked on a journey together with our customers. They're part of it, and they can suggest modifications. They can even bring in ideas, modify our journey. So this kind of relationship is so strong and so important to us, and it's generating so many loyal customers, and this loyalty compensates for the risk of random competitors taking inspiration from you. So having said that, it doesn't mean that from now on everybody should publish their roadmap directly on their website, like the Hotjar. It really depends on every case. But going back to the question, number one, where to show your roadmap and how, it really depends what your project management team adopts. In our case, for example, at Usually we use a product called Product Board, really useful. You can visualize everything that has happened or that happened before, that is currently happening, and that is going to happen in your product roadmap. And it's nice visualization that you can share with your users. So if you don't want to publish it, so as mentioned, you can have a blog post, you can have a web page, you can have many different ways to present your product roadmap. If you don't want to have this, like many customers do, you can always have like your own private page that you can show to your customers once you have them on the phone, right? So that's a kind of like a compromise. You prepare a nice visualization of your product roadmap and where you're going and what you want to do, what you want to achieve, and share it only with special people, especially if you identify what customers are extremely important to you. You want to have an even deeper relationship with them. You want to really, they should become kind of stakeholders in the whole development of your product, because their decision of working or not working with you will definitely change impact the destiny of your product as well. So use any product that allows you to collect information and visualize it. We use Product Board. It's just an idea. There are other products. Check this out. And then decide, do I want to publish it online? Do I want to have a blog post? Or do I prefer to keep it private, but share it with special customers, and so on and so on. So it's really, it's a kind of like a strategic decision, obviously. But I encourage you to show where you're going. And actually, also one last thing, I'm sorry if I'm getting
No,
sidetracked,
go
but
ahead. That's all awesome stuff.
showing your roadmap forces you to deliver on your promises. Because if you say, yeah, at some point we're going to introduce this feature, but then you're never going to do that, obviously you lose credibility and you lose customers. So by publishing, by having a public roadmap, then you are forced to stick to it, because every time you deliver, your credibility goes up and your customers say, yeah, of course. So that pushes also your product people a little bit. I don't know if you need that, but in many companies, product people need some motivation as well. You need activation there too. And so it's a good way to say, hey, just had this super huge customer on the phone. They expect that by, the end of April. So I told them we're totally going to deliver. So guys, there's no way back.
We
And
need to deliver.
I know, right? I remember I did, I wrote a blog post on a feature announcement that wasn't there yet. And then the product people say, oh man, then we really have to do that. Do more. Say, of course, dude. I launched the campaign, so it's scheduled for tomorrow. So
That's awesome. That's also a great way for customers to feel confident and feel like they can hold you accountable as well. So
of course, especially if you want to really fight silos in your companies and you want to have a cross-functional units in your company, customer success people and marketing people, sales people can impact the product, and why? Because they are direct in contact with the customers. So they have to be the people that also steer a little bit the product, because they have direct feedback. So it's totally normal. So it's okay.
That's awesome. Great. Thank you so much for answering all those questions. We do have a lot more questions we haven't answered, but I think it's time that we wrap up, unfortunately.
Okay.
I think you said maybe you're open to people connecting with you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, of
If they
course.
do have more questions, I think it's
Definitely.
just Andy Murat Userlane. So if anyone here, if we didn't get to answer your question, sorry about that. But for sure, I'd encourage everyone check out Userlane and get in touch with Andy if you have any questions, because he
Sure.
really is super knowledgeable. And this is
Just
only a
connect with
tiny
me
bit.
on yeah, but just connect with me on LinkedIn, as she said, or andy@usually.com is my email address. And if you have questions we didn't have time to answer, I'd be happy to chit chat a little bit.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank
Before
you.
we do log off, I think I just wanted to let everyone know about our next webinar, which is happening in 2 weeks. It's a workshop that we're holding with our CEO and founder, Paul Phillip. And you should have the link in the chat as well if you want to register already. And it's about how to build a powerful renewal playbook. So should be lots of fun. Definitely encourage everyone to check it out. But that's it for today. We will be sending the recording and the slides. And thank you so much to everyone who took the time to join us. And Andy, thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge with us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me and for having me over. It's great to work with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's really great. So have a wonderful day, everyone. Happy Wednesday, and looking forward to connecting with everyone in March.